All right, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, no, to all of you. All right, so magandang umaga, magandang hapon, at magandang gabi sa inyong lahat, no. Today, my discussion is about uh, cost accounting, no, particularly about the job order costing system, no. So ano lang to class, it is more on the basic concepts of it, particularly about the meaning of the job order costing and at the same time the journal entries, no. So saan ba nagsisimula talaga, no, particularly about the manufacturing cycle. So we will focus more on that. Okay, so let me share my screen. All right, so again I will use this Jamboard, no, para at least you can be able to understand it, particularly for this, no. So ito yung ating discussion for today. Okay, so job order costing system. Okay, so you have here your job order costing system. So what do you mean here of the job order costing system? So ano bang ibig sabihin ng job order costing system? Okay, so ang sabi, yes, it is also part of your cost accounting wherein ang ating cost ay based on cost per batch. Okay, so and also it is also cost per job. Kaya nga it is more on the job order costing system. Okay. Umiikot lang tayo class, no, to this discussion sa ating tinatawag na direct materials. Okay? So, 'di ba? You have your direct materials, you have your direct labor, okay? And you have your manufacturing overhead, na? So, diyan tayo class umiikot, no? Particularly in terms of your cost accounting. Okay? As we all know, if you add direct materials plus direct labor plus overhead, ang tawag dito class ay total manufacturing cost. Tama, okay? So, ang tawag dito class ay direct materials plus direct labor plus overhead. Ang tawag dito class ay total manufacturing cost. Or sa ibang libro, tinatawag din tong product cost. Or tinatawag din tong inventoriable cost. Okay, ibig sabihin, ito ay part of our inventory muna and eventually will become part of the finished goods. Okay, if you add direct materials plus direct labor, ang tawag dito class ay prime cost. Okay, ibig sabihin, majority of your cost is your direct materials and your direct labor. Direct labor and at the same time, your manufacturing overhead, ang tawag naman dito class ay conversion cost. Okay. Meaning to say, your materials will be converted into the finished product. While the prime cost, direct materials, and direct labor, if you add your manufacturing overhead, and that's your total manufacturing cost and or your product cost or inventoriable cost. Ang goal natin is that your total manufacturing cost ay magiging finished product or finished goods. Yan naman yung pinaka-goal natin. Okay. What do you mean of finished goods? It is completed product, no? And available for sale already. Kaya lang, if you are manufacturing your wood, you have your metal, you have your wood, you have your pako or tornilyo, no? Ang goal natin ay maging, yan ay maging table, no? Yan yung pinaka-goal natin, no? Your total manufacturing cost will be converted into the finished product. Kaya lang, may mga time, hindi pa yan tapos, diba? That's why may tinatawag din tayong work in process. Okay, so what do you mean of work in process? It is a partially completed product. No? So it is known as a partially completed product. That's why it is known as your work in process. Okay, so direct materials, direct labor, and overhead, it is known as your manufacturing cost or product cost or inventoriable cost. And you have your work in process, it is a partially completed product. So ang tawag dito class ay partially completed product. Okay. How about your finished goods, no? Ito naman class ay magiging finished goods and eventually it is a completed product na, no? So, ito ay tapos na and eventually, and after this one, finished goods, yan naman ay magiging cost of goods sold or tinatawag natin cost of sales. So, yan ang ating manufacturing process, no, na tinatawag. Okay? Sige. So in terms of our job order costing system, no, in terms of our job order costing system, very important here to consider yung tinatawag nating job cost sheet. Okay. So what do you mean here of job cost sheet? No? So ito yung ating ginagamit, no? Na summary, no? We're in to record all our, please take note of this, no? Sa ating job cost sheet, no, tatlo ang ating i-record, no? So you have your actual direct materials, no? Please take note of this, no? So we will record here your actual direct materials. We will record here our actual direct labor. Okay. Please take note of your manufacturing overhead. What what we will summarize here in the job cost sheet, yung tinatawag nating applied manufacturing overhead. My question, sir, bakit po? Why is it that in terms of the job order costing system, in terms of your manufacturing overhead, is that we record applied? Mamaya, we'll discuss kung bakit. Walang problema, it is actual direct materials. Walang problema, it is actual direct labor. Ibig sabihin, it is more on your actual cost. But in terms of the applied, but before that, what do you mean of applied manufacturing overhead? Sabi daw, in terms of the manufacturing overhead, it is to be recognized and to be recorded as estimated. Okay. My question, no? Sir, bakit po in the manufacturing overhead, it is based on the estimated? The reason is that dahil daw yung ating SOA, no, Statement of Accounts, particularly our utilities, no, especially some of our sabihin natin mga SOA, mga other manufacturing overhead, okay? Or other manufacturing overhead, usually daw ay uh, uh, dumarating ang ating SOA, no? Usually at the end of the month pa, no? At the end of the month. May mga time din, 2 months pa or 1 month after. That's why, in the manufacturing overhead, it is based muna sa ating estimated. Okay. Ito walang problema. Actual direct materials, it is actual direct labor. But my question, how do we compute for the applied manufacturing overhead? Una-una muna, we need to compute for our predetermined overhead rate. No? Very important here to record first our predetermined overhead rate. Now, how do we compute for our predetermined overhead rate? The formula here is that you have your estimated overhead cost, right? You will divide it by your estimated cost driver. Di ba? Yan yung ating formula, no? Estimated overhead cost divided by our estimated cost driver. Ang tawag doon, class, ay your predetermined overhead rate. Okay. My question, what do you mean here of cost driver? Depende yan, no? Pwede siyang direct material cost, right? Pwede naman direct labor cost. Pwede naman yan direct machine hours. Sorry, machine hours, direct machine hours. Or pwede naman yan direct labor hours. So, depende yan sa problem natin, no? In terms of computing for our applied manufacturing overhead. Okay. And number 2, we compute na for our applied manufacturing overhead. How do we do that, no? If, alimbawa, no, in the estimated overhead cost, we use machine hours. So the formula here is that your predetermined overhead rate, just multiply it by your actual cost driver. If your actual cost, if your estimated cost driver is your direct machine hours based on the estimated, our applied overhead stat, the predetermined overhead rate to be multiplied by the actual cost driver, which is the actual machine hours. No? Mamaya, we will discuss it one by one, particularly about our journal entries. Okay, particularly in our job order costing system. Sige, one by one tayo, no? Number one, what if you will purchase, no? What if you will purchase, okay, your property, sorry, your, what if you will purchase your inventory? Okay? Ibig sabihin, tinatawag tong raw materials. So, what is the entry for this? Okay? So, sabihin natin class, pag raw materials, kasama dito yung direct materials and also your indirect materials. Okay. So, what is the formula for this? You debit here, raw materials, inventory. So, you debit here, let's say, raw materials, sabihin natin class, yan ay worth 100,000. So, what is the entry for this? You debit, raw materials, inventory, okay, 100,000. And you credit here our accounts payable. Okay. Let's say you have your accounts payable or pwede naman cash. Okay. So, depende yan, ha? So, you have 100,000. Okay. In the job order costing system, particularly for the purchase of inventory, particularly about raw materials, no? So, ano ba yung mga documents na ginagamit dito? So, you have your materials inventory count, you have receiving report, or any other. Okay? Ibig sabihin, class, in the raw materials inventory, you have your raw materials. No? Sige. We have this one. Sige. I will put here in the ledger. Okay. So, I will put here your raw materials inventory. All right. So, you have your debit and you have your credit. So, you have here 100,000. Okay. Number two, what if you will incur, okay? So, the company incur factory labor. Okay? Sabihin natin, class, in terms of the factory labor, of course, you have your direct labor and also you have your indirect labor. Pero wala pa. So, I will put here 200,000. No? What if you want, or what if you will incur factory labor? What is the entry here? You debit here, factory labor. All right, so you debit here your factory labor worth 200,000. Usually, you have your SSS, you have your PhilHealth here, okay? You have here your withholding tax, no? And you have your cash. So, halimbawa lang, no? So, let's say you have 50,000, you have 80,000 here, you have 20,000 here. Any remaining, ano ba to? 8, 9, 10, or 50,000. Okay? So, that's your factory labor. Okay. So, you have also here our factory labor. All right. So, factory labor here, debit and credit. So, I will put here na lang factory labor and it is worth 200,000. Okay. So, ano naman yung mga usual, no, na mga documents to be used, no, particularly for your factory labor? So, yung mga biometrics natin or any other parts of the labor. Okay? Next one. Next one is number 3. Okay? Class. Ito yung class issuance na to production. Okay? So, what if, di ba kanina, our materials here is worth 100,000. Sabihin natin, out of raw materials of 100,000, no? Ito ay kailangan na natin sa ating production. Sabihin natin, class, inubos natin. Walang matitira, no? Out of 100,000, sabihin natin we identify that the direct materials here is worth 80,000. And out of indirect materials daw ay 20,000. Okay. Ibig sabihin, wala na matitira, no? So, kinuha natin. Okay, ito class ay issuance to production. Issuance to production. Ibig sabihin, what if you want to manufacture na table? So, kailangan ko na ng table, kailangan ko na ng metal, ng pako, ng tornilyo. Okay? Kailangan ko na ng ganyan, no? Para mag-manufacture tayo ng tables and chairs. or tables. Okay? So issuance to production. Usually, ano class ang ano dito? Ang documents to be used. Yung tinatawag nating materials, requisition, slip. Okay. Material, requisition slip. Ibig sabihin, kailangan ko na ng materyales. And out of 100,000, direct materials ay 80,000 and indirect materials naman ay 20. What is the entry for this? If you want to issue it to the production and it is direct materials, it is to be debited to our work in process. Magkano yung class? 80,000. Ibig sabihin, in the issuance of materials, no, pag yan ay direct materials, it is to be issued sa ating direct materials. So, work in process, DM. Okay? How about naman indirect materials? Please take note of this, ha. In terms of the indirect materials or indirect labor or mga manufacturing overhead, they are charged to our manufacturing overhead. So, I will charge it to the manufacturing overhead and we credit here our factory labor. Okay. Ibig sabihin, class, no, magiging zero na ang ating factory labor. Ay, 20K. 200,000 pala. No, sorry. Ay, 100,000. Sorry, 100,000. Okay? Yan, 100. So, ibig sabihin, magiging zero na yung ating raw materials. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, walang matitira, which is no, sorry. It should not be factory labor. It should be raw materials. Okay? Raw materials. Kasi hindi pa naman tayo sa labor. Okay? Ito naman ay raw materials. Okay? So, raw materials here is worth 100,000. Okay. So, ibig sabihin, class, no, in your T account, as your work in process, debit and credit. Okay? So, the work in process here of 80,000. So, I will put here 80,000 as your DM. Yan. Okay. And also, bagong-bago din yung ating tinatawag na manufacturing overhead, no? Or manufacturing overhead, debit and credit. Ibig sabihin, we debit here for our 20. Ano yung 20? And that's your indirect materials. Okay. Sige. Number 4. How about issuance to production, particularly for our factory labor? Magkano nga class yung factory labor kanina? Factory labor here is worth 200,000. So sabihin ng class, out of 200,000, you have your direct labor and indirect labor. Let's say ito naman ay 150,000. Ito naman ay 50,000. Okay? Ibig sabihin, direct labor is 150, indirect labor ay 50. So again, ganun pa rin. Work in process, particularly for our direct labor, it is worth 150,000. Okay. You have also here our manufacturing overhead. Ibig sabihin, 50 na naman ulit. Particularly about your indirect labor. And of course, you have our factory labor. Magkano yung factory labor natin? 200,000. Meaning to say, ito, magiging zero na to class, no? So, class tayo ay wala ng factory labor. Wala rin tayo in terms of raw materials inventory na. Zero na. But, of course, with this, no? So, we have your indirect labor. It is worth 50,000. While the work in process, we have our direct labor. So, in terms of direct labor, you have your 150,000. Meaning to say, in the work in process, what we debit here is your direct materials and your direct labor. Okay? While in the manufacturing overhead, what we debit here is the actual indirect materials and the actual indirect labor. Alright, so hopefully, nakakasunod ha. Okay. Number 5 tayo. Ito na, number 5. Ito na class, yung ating applied manufacturing overhead. As discussed a while ago, in computing for the applied manufacturing overhead, una muna class yung to compute for our predetermined overhead rate. Ano nga yung class? That's your estimated overhead cost, diba? Divided by our estimated cost driver. Estimated cost driver. Let's say, since tayo ay bago pa lang yung company, sige, we will use direct labor hours. O halimbawa, your estimated overhead cost, halimbawa lang to ha, 500,000. Let's say our estimated cost driver is 50,000. Okay? So, yan. So, 50,000. Ibig sabihin, okay, so the answer here is at 10. Tama ba? 500 minus 50, minus 50, divided by, so 500 divided by 50. 10, tama. Ano yung 10? 10 here is your predetermined overhead rate. Given naman lagi yan ha, estimated overhead cost divided by estimated cost driver. Number 2, compute now for our applied manufacturing overhead. Sabihin natin class that you have your 10 here. Just multiply it by our actual cost driver. Sabihin natin class, actual cost driver ay 10,000. Halimbawa lang ha. Okay? So, magkano class? Sabihin natin mga 20,000 na. Sige. Okay? So, 20 times 10. So, you have 200,000, di ba? Ibig sabihin, our fixed overhead, sorry, our manufacturing overhead applied is worth 200,000. So what is the entry for this? Again, the reason why we compute first for the estimated because at the beginning of the month pa, sorry, at the end of the month pa natin makikita kung magkano ang ating manufacturing overhead. Okay, so what is the entry for this? The entry for this is that work in process, particularly for our applied manufacturing overhead. Magkano yung class? 200,000. What is your credit? Of course, ang credit natin here is our manufacturing overhead. Class, ako lang yung magkasabi, no? Particularly about our manufacturing overhead. So, what we will do here is that we credit it to our manufacturing overhead. Okay. We go first to this work in process, no? Yan. So, ito na naman, class, no? So, you have actual. Ito naman ay yung ating applied overhead. Magkano yan? 200,000. Your applied manufacturing overhead is worth 200,000. Okay. How about naman your manufacturing overhead here? So you have your 200,000. At 200,000 here, that's your applied manufacturing overhead. Mamaya class, no? Ginagawa ko dito is that in terms of the manufacturing overhead, lalagay ko dito class yung actual and dito naman sa kabila ay applied. Mamaya, we explain kung bakit ganon, no? But for the meantime, ang formula natin ay like this. So, debit, work in process, applied overhead, and credit naman, your manufacturing overhead worth 200,000. Okay? Yan. Yan na muna tayo. Sige, we go first to this, no? Sabihin natin, class, that in the work in process, ano to, 350, no? 350, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So, 350 plus 80, you have 430. Sabihin natin, class, 430, so 200 plus 150 plus 80, you have 430. Out of 430, in the work in process, sabihin natin, class, yung 300,000 nito ay magiging part na ng cost of goods manufactured. Ibig sabihin, tapos na. So, magkano class yung ating ending? 430 minus 300. Our ending here is worth 130,000. What is 130,000? That's your work in process ending. Okay, yan. So, you have 130. So, malamang, yung 300,000 here na cost of goods manufactured mo ay magiging part na siya ng finished goods inventory. Okay, so you have here your finished goods inventory of 300,000. Okay. Ibig sabihin na ibenta natin yung 300,000. Out of 300,000, sabihin natin 200,000 is now your cost of goods sold. Ibig sabihin, your balance na lang at the end of the month is worth 100,000. Okay? On the part naman of your cost of goods sold, ito ay maging CGS. Ililipat din sa ating CGS worth 200,000. Okay? So, the 200,000 here, yan yung ating naibenta na, no? So, yan ay benta na natin. Okay? Ibig sabihin, cost of goods sold mo ay 200,000. Yan. So, hopefully, naintindihan ako, class, ha? Okay. Sige. Number 6 tayo. O, di ba, class, puna tayo sa ating manufacturing overhead. 20, 50, 200. Sige. Number 6. Okay, ano nga yung class? You have your manufacturing overhead. Indirect materials, indirect labor, and this one is applied, no? So you have your applied. Your applied here, if I remember right, 200,000, di ba kanina? Okay? So indirect materials, ano nga yan? 20 and 50. You have here 20,000, 20,000, and you have your 50,000. So 70, or you have 200 and you have 70. Okay. Sabihin natin class, you incur ano pa? 5, 6, 7. Okay, sabihin natin class, you incur additional additional overhead. Halimbawa, okay? So, let's see, additional overhead. Sabihin natin class, utilities. Let's say 30,000. Let's say, ano, utilities, bawa depreciation. Okay? Sabihin natin 20K, 20K din. Okay? Let's say rental. Halimbawa lang to, ha? Rental, it is worth 10. Yan. So, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ibig sabihin, you have an additional 60K as your manufacturing overhead. Class, in terms of the actual, sabi ko nga kanina, all your debit is your actual. All your credit naman is your applied manufacturing overhead. Okay? So, mamaya, it will be, we will transfer it with our overhead. Okay? So, what is the entry for this? You debit manufacturing overhead, no? So, you debit here, manufacturing overhead, 20,000. Ito yan, no? And you credit here, sorry, not 20, 30 lang. Mali, mali. Ito pala, 30, 20, and 10. So, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have 60,000. Ibig sabihin, others is worth 60,000. Okay, what else? So, yun yung ating debit, no? Manufacturing overhead. So, ano yung ating mga credit? Utilities, expense. Magkano yan? 30,000. Okay? You have also here our depreciation expense. Yan. So, dep expense, magkano yan? 20,000. 2020, ha? So, yan. Okay? Then, the last one is all about rental. So, you have rental payable. Okay? Ito, payable na to, ha? Okay. So, magkano yung class? 10,000. Yan. Okay? So, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, you have your 60,000. Your 60,000 here is your debit. Okay? So, yan. So, incur additional overhead. What we record in our debit is all our actual. What we record in our credit is all our applied manufacturing overhead. Okay. Yan. We go now to this, no? So, finished goods. Okay. O nga pala. Ito pala, wala pa tong entry, no? Saka dito pala, wala pang entry. Alright? The 300,000 in terms of the CGM. So what is the entry for the CGM of 300,000? Number 7, the answer cost of goods manufactured, it is worth 300,000. What is the entry here? We debit here our finished goods inventory. So we debit here our finished goods inventory. Magkano yan, class? 300,000. And we have our work in process, which is at 300,000. Yan. Number 8. What if naman yan ay to be transferred na sa ating cost of goods sold? Alright? So you have 300 and eventually yan ay magiging 300 minus 200. Okay? So meaning to say, yung 200,000 mo ay magiging cost of sales na. So you debit here. So cost of goods sold mo were 200,000. So what is the entry here? So you debit here our cost of goods sold, 20,000. And you credit here what? You credit here our finished goods, right? So you have here your finished goods inventory. Okay? It is worth 20,000. Yan. So, yan class, yan yung ating mga entries sa atin. Okay? Yan, I think we are finished. Okay. Next one. So, in terms of our income statement, now please take note of this. Now, in terms of our income statement, yes, we have our direct materials. Yes, we have our direct labor. Okay. And also we have our, please take note ha, manufacturing overhead. Overhead. Okay. Magkano muna class ang ating direct materials? No? How much would be our direct materials? Ito yan, no? 80, 150, 200. 80, 150, 200. 80, 150, 200. 80. So you have your 80,000. You have 150,000. And you have here our 200,000. So 350 plus 80, you have 430. Ano yung 430,000? That's your total manufacturing cost. Okay? So you have 430 as your total manufacturing cost. Okay. Then you add our work in process beginning. Magkano naman yung work in process beginning? Wala. 0, di ba? So you have your total. Ang ating total ay 430,000. How about in terms of our WIP ending? Okay. So if you have 430 here, go to our work in process. This one. 130 yung ating work in process end. Alright. So 130 would be our work in process. Okay. Yan. Ending. So, ibig sabihin, magkano yung cost of goods manufactured? Okay. So, magkano class ang CGM? So, you have 430 minus 130. So, you have here 300,000. Anong tawag doon? Cost of goods manufactured. Then, you add our finished goods beginning. Okay? Meron ba tayong finished goods beginning? I think wala. Okay? I think wala. Wala din. Okay? So, 200 yung ating cost of goods sold. Alright? So, 0 to. So, you have total goods available for sale. Ano yan? 300 minus plus 0. So, you have here 300,000. Okay. Then, less our finished goods ending. Magkano class yung finished goods ending? I think 200,000. 100. Okay? So, you have here 100,000. So, minute sa class, magkano ba ang ating cost of goods sold? cost of goods sold. Okay? So you have here 3 minus 1, you have 200,000. Okay? So ibig sabihin class, ang cost of goods sold mo. Please take note ha. The cost of goods sold here of 200,000, please take note. Ang tawag diyan class ay normal cost of goods sold. Okay. My question, no? Bakit normal cost of goods sold? In your income statement, if you notice, you have your actual direct materials, you have your actual direct labor, and we have our manufacturing overhead, which is based on the applied overhead. Okay? So yan ay based sa ating estimate. That's why what we compute here is about normal cost of goods sold. Okay? So how do we compute for the actual cost of goods sold? Yung tinatawag nating applied over and underapplied manufacturing overhead. Okay? Yan. So yung tinatawag nating applied overhead. Class, as you notice kanina, sabi ko nga, in your manufacturing overhead, what we debit here is only your actual. But naman, in terms of applied overhead, we will credit it to our manufacturing overhead. Yang class ang ibig sabihin niya, no? So we go back to the manufacturing cost. Magkano yung manufacturing cost? Ito. 20, 50, and 60. 20, 50, and 60. 20, 50, and 60 ha. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, indirect materials is 20,000. Indirect labor is we have our 50,000. 50 ba yan? Sorry. Tama, 20, 50, 60, diba? Yan. Yes, very good. And yung ating last ay ating applied manufacturing overhead. And we have our applied overhead. Magkano yung class? 60,000. Okay. So, ibig sabihin, you have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So, you have 100, 130. Kaya lang, class, no? Nung dumating na, no? Magkano yung applied overhead natin? You have 200,000. Okay? Yung ating applied naman ay 200,000. What do you mean of this, class, no? Ibig sabihin, your actual mo is 20 plus 50 plus 60, which is 130. Okay? Ano ba? 6, 7, 8. Tama. Ibig sabihin, ang actual mo ay 20, 50, 60. Pero, ang na-apply mo lang ay 200. Oh, my question, it is under or over applied? Again, 60 plus 50, you have 110 plus 20. Ibig sabihin, you have 130, no? Sorry, 130. That's your actual overhead. Pero na-estimate mo ay 200. Ibig sabihin, ikaw ay very good. Over-applied. Okay? Because mas malaki ang applied mo compared with our actual. Okay. So, paano pa ganun, sir? Alright, para magbalanse. So, you have 20 plus 50. So, 20 plus 50 plus 60. So, 130. So, you have 70. So, gawin yung class para magbalanse. Put here 70. Okay? Sigurado class that you have 70 kasi para magbalanse. So, 70 plus 60 plus 50 plus 20, you have your 200,000. Okay. Anong tawag dyan? Ito class ay over-applied. Class, we debit manufacturing overhead. So, we debit here our manufacturing overhead. Magkano yan, class? 70,000. Okay. So, kaya lang, class, over-applied to. Ibig sabihin, napasobra yung pag-apply natin. So, what we will do here is babawasan natin for the over-applied overhead. Meaning to say, debit manufacturing overhead of 70. And since ito ay, ano daw, you have your 70, no? So, ibig sabihin, class, babawasan mo yung cost of goods sold mo. Kano? Okay? Of course, ang ating cost of goods sold here is that uh, 70,000. So, babawasan natin ng 70,000. Okay. Halimbawa, class yan ay baliktad. Manufacturing overhead. Okay? So, halimbawa, debit, credit, baliktad yung ating debit ay 200,000. So, 200 ito Okay? Baliktad Tapos, 200,000. Yung ating credit naman ay 70. Okay, syempre, ano naman to? Ito naman ay underapplied, no? Para magbalanse, okay? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Mali pala ako. Mali. So, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Ito ay at 130,000. Not 130,000. Okay? Ibig sabihin naman, ito naman ay underapplied, no? Ang na-apply natin ay 130, pero yung actual pala ay 200. Para magbalanse, I will put here 70,000. Okay? Yes. So, class, ibig sabihin, we credit our manufacturing overhead. That's why we credit here our manufacturing overhead. Magkano yun? 70,000. Okay? How about naman, since ito ay underapplied, ibig sabihin, dadagdagan natin ang ating cost of goods sold. Cost of goods sold. Ayan. Magkano yung class? 70,000. So, ganun class ang ating adjustment, particularly for the over and the underapplied manufacturing overhead. We go back to this. Okay? Magkano yung normal cost of goods sold natin? 200,000. Classes, please take note of this, no? Para makompute natin yung actual cost of goods sold, any underapplied, okay? We will add, no? So, add our underapplied overhead. Okay? So, magkano yung underapplied overhead? 70,000. Okay? O, paano naman yung class pag overapplied? Pag overapplied, babawasan natin ang ating cost of goods. But before that, ito muna tayo. Ay, over pala. Sige, mali ako. Basta, pag under, you add, no? Pag under, you add. So, ibig sabihin, you have here 270,000. Okay? But how about naman, pag yan naman ay over-applied, no? Ang ating normal cost of goods sold ay 200,000. Okay? Yan. So, magkano naman pag over-applied, we will minus less under, okay, applied. Mali. Over pala. Okay, less. Okay, less your over-applied, no? Over-applied. Pag over-applied naman, yan ay to be deducted. Kano yung class? 70,000. So, all in all, you have 130,000. Anong tawag ng class? Actual cost of goods sold. Tawag ng class ay actual cost of goods sold. Okay. So, that's the thing, no? That we need to consider particularly for our cost accounting, particularly for our job order costing system. Okay? So, para at least we can be able to understand it, particularly on how to record it, no? For me, mas maganda ganito, no? Gawin nyo. Isa lang yung manufacturing overhead cost natin na ginagamit natin. Kasi baka at least, baka malito kayo, no? Basta on the part of debit, yan ay actual, while the CR or it's more on our applied manufacturing overhead. Okay? So, yan. So, that's the thing that we need to consider, particularly for our job order costing system. To summarize everything to this, again, your direct materials, your direct labor, and overhead, they're all to be part of our, part dapat siya ng ating finished goods. No? Kaya lang may mga time, hindi pa yan tapos, kaya ang tawag sa kanya ay work in process. Pag yan naman ay tapos na, okay, of course, transfer mo na siya sa finished goods inventory. Okay? So, then umiikot class ang ating definitions now, particularly about our manufacturing and also about our cost accounting. Your direct materials, your direct labor, they're all to be converted into the finished product. And of course, you have here what you call the work in process, which is the partially completed product. Okay? Yan. So, unless you have question. So, kung wala na, so thank you very much and hope to see you.